Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just to sum things up, if I can, in a topic that's never summed up, in an ability that's never fully complete by a person who is more ignorant than wise. Each of us is born a seeker. We may not know it, but that's what characterizes us. And every one of us regards himself in the core of our heart as incomplete until we find some supreme idea or supreme principle to attach ourselves to. Even people who are, how shall I say, not the best human beings, tend to wrap themselves in something greater than themselves. And in a way, that's a strange testimony to the fact that we all know that there's something more than ourselves. Even the worst tyrants will wrap themselves in words of freedom or democracy or religion or something. So it does tell us something. I think we all in some way want to explain the existence, our own existence, and we want to understand our place in the world. We want to discover the purpose of life, and so each one of us is a seeker. But how many of us are finders? If the seeking is inherent, instinctive, the finding is quite the contrary. The finding is a result of our own conscious effort, our own intention. Hence, we're told that actions follow intentions. And there have been people throughout the history of humanity, pre-Judaic times, obviously, because Ibrahim alayhi salam was pre-Judaic, pre-Islamic times, pre-Christian times, who were hunafa, seekers of truth. And the tendency was that they would secret themselves away in some place, and we see among all many of the Anbiya, they go to the cave or they go to the mountain. And they would talk to some entity by some name. We would say God or truth or Allah. And they would say something like, oh Allah, if we knew how to worship you, we would worship you in that way. Because in trying to come to understanding of reality with a small r, we realized at some point we have to try to come to understanding of reality with the large R. And that urge to understand is found, I think, at the core of the heart and the batin of everybody. The differences between us may at times be seemingly great. Cultural differences, dogma difference, doctrine and differences, linguistic differences, historical differences. But in reality, we're only maybe 1 degree of separation from one another if we would just have that opportunity to build a bridge of understanding. In some people, the desire to understand is very weak. So it has to go through so many filters, personal experiences, tragedies, the vicissitudes of day-to-day life. In others, the urge is very, very strong. The Khidmat is very strong. And so the tendency is for us to iconify life, to put our goals in finances or homes or jobs or reputations and the obtaining of these kind of material objects in life. And we get enthusiastic about these things, and some of them are quite beautiful and creative, a beautiful architecturally designed office or home, a car that's well designed, a new tool to do our work, a new surgical instrument, a new technology that can be used for the good. But rarely do they have to do with the purpose of our life. They could assist us. They could give us ease in a way that we'd have more time to spend inwardly. But the purpose of life can, I think, really only be a spiritual purpose, not a material one. And I think the people who have attained to the most distinction in life are the people who are clearly the more spiritual people in life, for whatever reasons they are. The Nelson Mandelas, the Mother Teresas, the countless saints that we know of in our tradition, Mahatma Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. They dealt with real issues. They dealt with life and death issues. They dealt with a lot of sacrifice. They dealt with the hardest things to deal with, but they were clearly spiritual human beings, clearly. We talked about the migration of animals last night I guess it was. The birds fly south to find a more compatible environment for the winter time. The deer is camouflaged in such a way as to hide itself from its predators. The turtle's greatest enemy is a motor vehicle, not a predator usually. And our survival, however, becomes purposeful only when that animal nature in us becomes controlled, and we realize that our goal is a spiritual goal. And some people realize it and some people don't. We're given cognitive capabilities to try to search for our purpose. Sometimes the search becomes more important than the purpose. When people become very enamored of, to be adventurer, hoping in a way, some strange way, never to reach their goal. Falling in love with the process and not the goal. But all of this has to come from an urge to find the truth, an urge inside of us to understand what is the reality behind the reality. After all, we could translate La ilaha illallah is there is nothing real except for something that is real. There's nothing true except for the existence of something, a greater truth. And when we make money and we build our homes and we make an effort to improve our lives, which we all try to do, I think, and we engage our attention into some worthy goal, serviceful goal, even that cannot be called a life of real purpose unless and until they're born out of a struggle, not for survival, physical for survival, but for spiritual understanding and knowledge. Of course, we have to put food on the table. I think we're known for our hospitality, good food, healthy food. These are all very important things. But I guess the brief statement is to make a life purposeful, is to make it, to determine, I guess to say, that to determine the purpose of life is to make life meaningful. And that also means that it has to come in somehow into context with our individual placement in this universe. We've been created as the best of all of creation. And then we have fallen to the lowest of the low. And for us to make progress on this path, we have to make conscious effort. And this search, the irada, the will to, as what my Shaykh called the search for truth, he called the Institute for the Search for Truth, is really at the core of all of us. And it depends upon us individually whether or not we're going to pursue that natural urge and to what degree we're going to do it. And only if we have real ikhlas, we really are sincere, are we going to be able to develop this kashf that will rend the veil, that will lift the veil, and discover the essence, the truth behind this thing we call life. And we really don't have any excuse to be lazy, apathetic. We really don't. All nature tells us that it puts its full effort into being what it has been created to be. The chives that I'm looking at outside the window, the aloe plant in the window, the animal raiding into our garbage disposal, the raccoons at night that like to live in the ceiling of the masjid. They all know their purpose, but they don't know it. They live it fully. But that's a model for us. And so we can't be negligent. But the question that we have to ask is, where do I begin the search? How do I sustain the search? And how do I give up the idea of ending the search? How do I learn to live in an open-ended universe that's constantly, that Allah, if you want to say, is constantly unveiling and unveiling and unveiling mystery after mystery after mystery, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and showing me where I am blocking that way. And the gift of repentance comes. And Allah says, don't worry about that. People won't forgive you. They're not going to forget, but I will. And I think that any of us who have lived past the age of 35 or 40 know that to be true. There are many things we would do differently, but at least if in the heart you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven you, meaning that you have created a path for harmony again, another opportunity, then that's really all that matters. Even though it eats at you inside that my old friend or this person or that person or whatever, it does eat at you, but eventually you understand that the most important thing is to fulfill this journey. So even that problem is relieved from us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So history goes on. We're creating history every day. Today, the first Ebola patient contracting Ebola in the United States in the Dallas hospital, where they were dressed in all of the hazmat thing, got Ebola. History is being made today. And not just in the area of medical science, not in the area of warfare, in the area of business, in the area of economic, in the area of, pick an area. History is being made today. Somebody's working on a new hybrid flower that he's going to grow in the garden next year and going to bring joy to us. And people have turned to various philosophies for the truth over the history of humanity. And so we come to the means, and the means in the outer is service. Of course, the outer forms of worship to turn us inwardly, but service is an indispensable means. It's not something you can say, oh yeah, well, I think I'll pick service. I'm going to be a karma yogi, not a jnana yogi. I'm going to be a karma yogi, not a hatha yogi. Yeah, it's not so easy like that. And I think that one of the noblest and one of the highest feelings that a mu'min could have is the urge, is the yearning to help others. Not just helping others because that's your job and you're getting paid for it. Not helping others because, well, it's nice and people need my help. But the yearning to help others, to assist others. And one should fulfill that need without expecting anything in return. You get plenty in return. So many blessings. So many blessings. Somebody called me the other day and told me something that I had said to them in a talk that allowed them to make a decision to pursue something in their career. And I said, you made my day. And it's true. I felt, well, you know, alhamdulillah. I didn't tell them anything I never told anybody else. I didn't tell them something in order to get a phone call or a Skype message. It's your attitude. Our friend Joe Robinson, a self-described Lynchburg redneck, who's been to 85 countries and represented 5 governors as a trade rep for the state of Virginia, retired, consults with me every day, free. He's a good friend, calls me brother, defends Islam in this crazy Lynchburg community of the evangelical Taliban. They just don't have weapons yet. Well, they do, actually. They haven't had a call to arms, I guess. I called him up on the phone and said, Joe, how are you today? He said, somewhere between excellent and perfect. And it's getting better. That's how he answers the question. How are you this morning, Joe? He has a story for everything, if not 10. Stories you've heard over and over and over again. It reminds me of, you know, me. I love him, he's my age, I respect him, and I learned how to be silent and listen to those stories over and over again because he uses them at the right moment. It's like telling the Hoja story at the right moment, not sitting down and reading to your children a book of Hoja stories. They have to be told in the moment. The couplet has to come in the moment. Our Persians understand this. Some of our Desis grew up with Baba Farid Ganj Shakar, Rahmatullah Ali. And the poetry, the Persian poetry that became then Urdu poetry, they know that the couplet has to come at the right moment. The Hoja story has to come at the right moment. The story about my life, what my daddy told me. My daddy always used to say to me, I came at the right moment. And it's our responsibility to translate that. That's a service also. That's khidmat. So coming to the assistance of others is really essentially acknowledging the blessings which Allah has showered upon us. And this take some time and go back to my talks or go open up a lexicon and look at this word nuas in Arabic. Understand what's being said in Hizbul Bahr. This misty, it's, you know, when you walk out in the mist in the morning and it's not raining and it's not clear, but you're saturated. This blessing, this saturation is there. And a person who helps others has something more than others have. And where does that come from? A person who can see helps the blind. A person who can hear helps the deaf. These are precious gifts. A person who is physically able, like these young men, not so young anymore. Young man, where are you? Isa, I don't know where are you, Isa? Is Isa here?
He's not well, so.
Help me carrying things. Help me carrying things this week. This young lady, Lina, who is worth her weight in muscle with 5 men. And this young man, you have something that we don't have, and they offer it. These are really precious gifts. A person who has resources should donate to the poor. The person will help those who lack something. But when, in these instances, a man or a woman helps another human being, it's by the virtue of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And that action of helping someone else is an act of gratitude toward Allah. Having the means and helping someone else is an act of gratitude toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're saying basically, Ya Allah, whatever I have has been given to me by you, and now I'm going to spend it or offer it in your name. I don't mean literally necessarily, or on your path, and I pray that you give me more blessings so that I can do more service. And so, as we engage ourselves in what I would call social work, where's my social worker? Gone? Did she die? Where are you? Is she there? Huh? Outside. I promised her I was going to talk about social. What I would call social work. It's not just helping another person, but it's actually raising your own moral and ethical status in the eyes, so to speak, of Allah. And making use of what one has, what one possesses in the material world. If we only use it for our own self, in a way we're back to the vegetable and the animal kingdom. We're hiding the nuts in the ground for ourselves for the winter time. We're sapping the energy for our own roots out of the soil. But Allah evolved us as human beings and gave us more than we need. And now we have to share it. So in that way, we're really more advanced than the other creatures, and we live on a much higher plane, except for that animal nature when it takes over. And we destroy the environment that sustains us. We destroy the friendships that uplift us. We destroy the ability to really serve in the proper way, and our life becomes meaningless. And I don't care what flag you wrap yourself in, or what name you call yourself, or what religion you proclaim, then you're really of the kuffar. Then you're really a kafir. Because the right attitude, in accordance with the status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to be in, is not to keep to ourselves, but is to recognize that we're all related. And we have a responsibility. And we must wish the best to everyone. We must hope for the best for everyone. It does not diminish us in any way. If I take a candle and I light another candle and another candle and another candle from that, the flame of the first candle isn't diminished. It spread its light. Now I'm talking about a candle that obviously has endless amount of wax, but you don't understand. We have to be ready to help anyone and everyone. We have to accept that we have to protect people's rights over their own property. This is basic Islamic teaching. We have to protect people's rights of ingress and egress. We have to protect their rights of worship. We have to protect their rights over their family, their property, their lives, their health, their well-being. We have to. Not because we're told to, but because if we remove the veils of the nafs amara, if we remove our prejudice and our bigotry, if we remove our blame, that we blame somebody else, or our judgmentalness over somebody else's words or actions that we have no personal experience with, or even if we do, we take it out of a snapshot and we say, this is just part of that person's progression, that part of learning, then we realize that we have to protect that individual, sometimes even from themselves, in a good way, by giving good action and good intention. So what I call social work, you have to say this back with them today, so Fatima can hear this, is service to humanity. It's that simple. A service to all humanity, without regard to gender, or orientation, or religion, or geography, or tradition, or culture, or language, or religion, or race, or without it. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's in our Constitution, and we don't follow it. But it's there for a reason, because somebody knew it, somebody understood it. You know, there's the old story that Benjamin Franklin, when they were writing, had a man of dark skin staying in his home, a foreigner of dark skin from his home. He was probably Moroccan, who he would go up at times and he would consult. There's this kind of apocryphal story that has some evidence to it, that he would go and consult during the writing of the Constitution. Well, don't forget, there was the first real documented Constitution was Persian, and the second one was the Medinan ones of the Prophet Muhammad. It was not, these are the only people who knew these principles as what do we call it, documented, a document, a written document. And so when we look at the principles of Islam, we have to say that it is ibadah, worship, and being an abidah, to be a servant in servitude, worship and service. And if you don't put these two principles into practice, then how do you fulfill your religious duties, your religious obligations, your spiritual yearning, your role as a human being? If you don't put them into practice, what are you doing, trying to run through the raindrops? So Islam as a deen inculcates a spirit of service and love and mutual respect. And we can say that by serving other human beings, we please Allah. And we've discussed that to some degree. But also, what we do is we serve ourselves, but in a selfless way. According to a hadith, you should be merciful to the people on this earth, and Allah will be merciful to you. And so, what happens is we get this merging, this linkage between personal progress and personal freedom and serving of others. There's this inextricable link between our own spiritual progress and our service to other human beings and nature and the environment. And so if some people are motivated by the rewards of the hereafter or the fear of hell, as I talked about earlier, but even if you take that approach, there is no reward in the hereafter unless you serve others. And you cannot choose how you serve others. The need chooses how you serve others. You certainly cannot serve others by destroying their property, by taking their humanity away. And of course we know the story that on the day of the Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will say, I was ill, but you didn't come to serve me. How can you be ill? So-and-so was a servant of mine, and he was ill, and you didn't help him. Thirsty, you didn't give me water. You know the story. It's all about service, right? Being aware that the divine is present in every moment in every human being, and that human being's need is placed there as a requirement, as an opportunity for us to serve them, their illness, their financial need, their social need, their educational need, whatever it is. And so therefore we are all, every one of us is placed in a position where we are a servant. But then there's the other thing, and that is, if we want to find the way, the Sayr Allah, if we want to come nearer toward or move toward Allah, toward Allah. And you all know what I mean when I say that. To refine our compassion and our mercy and our sense of justice and our availability and our commitment and our love and our submission and our obedience and our beauty and our creativity and our magnanimity and all of it. If we want to increase our contact with the source of those aspects within us, we have to make ourselves deserving of helping others. And that act of making yourself available and deserving is a great spiritual effort and makes great spiritual progress. And there's no doubt that the people who have made themselves available, there's no doubt that the people who have made themselves available spiritually will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will find Him where He said He is, in the heart of the believer. They will find Him in their own hands, in their own feet, in their own tongue. And so this is a culture, by the way. It's a culture of love. It's a culture of mercy. It's a culture of compassion. It's a culture of justice. Islam. But make no mistake about it. It's not just extending to human beings. It extends to the animals, to the vegetable kingdom, to the environment as a whole. We are responsible. And either you're going to teach people how to understand that from within, but you're also going to have a 501c3 called the Green Muslims and do it from without. But the most successful will be as it is an expression of your own personal, deep, guided understanding of your role as a humane human being. And it cannot happen unless you have an infrastructural support, which is a civil society to operate in. And so we have a lot of guidelines on how to look after animals and nature. And we had a talk in Morocco by my friend in Cairo from my friend Dr. El-Biltaji. Adel El-Biltaji. He was now the Minister of Environment under the new government. And Adel is like a brother of mine, an older brother. Wonderful man. His wife is Aisha Rafai. Not Aisha. Her sister's name is Aisha. What's her? Aliyah Rafai. Teacher at Ain Shams. And he presented the state of the environment to us from a public health perspective. It was not a happy picture. Not a happy picture at all. And there is a man who sees all the details and knows all the seeds in the world that have to be preserved and understands what's happening to the coast of, what's going to happen to the coast of the Mediterranean and how many people are going to die by the year 2030 if such and such doesn't happen, and what's happening in the migration of birds and the fish and all of that. And he's a hopeful human being because he's a pious human being, because his father-in-law was a great sheikh in Egypt, Aliya's father. And because he believes He believes in this relationship between the human being and all of nature. These are the blessings to know such people, to be in the contact with such people. One of the hadith is that concerns a very religious woman who spent most of her time in worship, and one day she became angry at a cat and tied it up with a rope, and it deprived it of food and water. And the cat remained tied up in this state until it died of thirst and hunger. And Allah so strongly disapproved of this that despite the woman's devotions, He said that she would be cast into hell for the treatment of one cat. Another story, a hadith about a woman of ill repute, hated by people. She was walking along a path one day and she found a dog lying on the ground dying of thirst. And she was so sympathetic for it that she looked everywhere for water and she couldn't find any water. And then she noticed a nearby well with water deep in it, but there was nothing in which to draw the water from. And she thought of her shawl, to which she tied her shoe to it and lowered it into the well, and she was able to bring up the water, and she poured it into the mouth of the dying dog. And she did this until the dog's thirst was quenched. And then it revived and it walked away, and according to this hadith, Allah was so pleased with her that He decreed that no matter what, she would enter paradise. So we have to be merciful to everything. You know, the story I like to tell about the man goes down to make wuzu, the sheikh goes down to make wuzu at the river's edge, and there's a scorpion in the water that's drowning, and he picks up the scorpion and the scorpion stings him, and he drops it, and then he does it again, and he drops it, does it again, and his murid is with him, and he says to him, "Ya sheikh, why you keep picking up the scorpion and it keeps stinging you? Why do you keep picking it up?" He said, "I'm just doing what I have to do, and the scorpion's doing what he has to do." So, if you have no feeling of mercy, how could you know the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was sent as a mercy? If you have no compassion, how can you pray and say, Bismillah Rahman Rahim? If you have no value for the things of this world, why do you put such value on power and ownership and material gains? But the person of mercy and the person of compassion, a person who values life, will be called an Abdullah. And so this kind of action is what softens the heart. This kind of action is what opens up those doors of the lataif. And that's why we say that dhikr penetrates into the depths of the heart. And what will emerge automatically is the mercifulness and the kindness and the love and the sense of justice and all of the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which we have seated in us, that we'll be able to see with basira. We'll have the ayn al-qalb will be open. And look, it's not just the fact that a person becomes a Muslim or they do their prayers and all that. It's whether or not you can fulfill what those prayers intend, whether or not you're going to fulfill the intentions and the teachings. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu traveled from Medina to Philistine, he took only one camel with him. And he said that if he continued to ride the camel during the journey, it would be cruelty to the animal. So he had to give it rest, and he rode and he walked by turns so that the animal should have periods of rest until he reached the destination. That's the real spirit of Islam. That's the real concern. What's our camel? What's our camel? Is your car your camel? Take care of your car. You know? Your feet your camel? Take care of your feet. Your body your camel? Take care of your body. You're riding somebody else's camel? You're leasing somebody else's camel? Take care of that person's camel. Be compassionate. Prophet ﷺ said, by Allah, he's not a Muslim who eats his fill while his neighbor goes hungry. Why would you know that your neighbor's going hungry if you weren't paying attention? The story that I told the other day that we worked on in the study group, and that I told you that we've worked on for all these weeks in the different ways we've used the story of the baker and Baki Bilal rahmatullahi. For those of you who don't know, it is a very simple story, but a very deep story. Baki Bilal rahmatullahi, who was the Sheikh of Ahmed Faruqi Sirhindi rahmatullahi, was a Persian. He lived only in Delhi for about 3 years. I prayed and meditated at his dargah many times, many times. And some very prestigious people of Delhi came to visit him. And he was poor, he had nothing. And the baker, who had a small shop across the street, was not his murid, and he saw that these prestigious people were coming, dressed very well, coming, so he rushed and brought food. So that Baki Billah had something to give to the people who came to visit him. And Baki Billah, after they had left, called the baker to him and he said, what can I do for you? You were so kind to me, you were so generous to me. What can I do for you? He said, I want to be you. He said, no. Give me something I can do for you. No, he said, I want to be you. 3 times, he said, and Baki Billah said, come with me. He took him into a khilwa, into an inside room, sat with him. And when the man came out, he looked like and he acted like and he spoke just like Baki Billah. And then the man died. And if you want to know more about the meaning of the story, contact our people, and we'll give you the series of talks on it and how it applies. Not only know what you're asking for, know your capabilities, know the power of tawajjuh, know many things in the story. We have to care about all of humanity. And of course we're told in Hadith to extend our greeting and feed to people and feed the people and earn your place in paradise. So who is welcome through the doors of paradise? Literally or figuratively. Is a person whose heart is not impatient for their own needs, but is impatient for the needs of others. Whose heart wishes peace not just for themselves and their family, but peace for the whole of humanity. Whose love and goodwill extends to every living creature. Who wants to share what they have, even a morsel, with some other human being. Remember, the removal of a stone from the path is zakat. Someone who will share your pain and suffering as well as help you to overcome your pain and suffering. So this is the deen that should be known as Islam. These are the type of people who we should be and could be like. The question is, what are we willing to do for it? What are we willing to pay for it? Allah placed us where we're placed. He didn't make a mistake. So, I could have gone up to New York this week. I could have stayed in town and gone to the whatever game. I could have met that really nice girl that someone wanted me to fix, a nice, good Muslim girl that somebody wanted to fix me up with this weekend. But I told her I was going down to Shaykh Rashid. I'm sorry. Now I really regret I didn't stay up in D.C. Or you can accept that Allah placed you where you are, and if it's been a painful experience and one that took a lot of effort, I'm sorry. Take it up with the boss. I'm just one of his worst servants. Thank you for coming. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Lecture side, the old fashion, but feel free to speak if you'd like to.
After your talk last night, we had this conversation about one of the points that you mentioned, that don't serve or don't get fed by feeding others. Something like that, right? That's the statement you mentioned. But then that reminded me of something else that I had experienced before. When you're serving, actually you receive more. So
Do you feel that there's a dichotomy?
Yeah, well, like by giving, you receive more.
Yes.
So if you're giving to receive more, that's not really giving. Just receiving is like trying to receive more.
Well, you just answered your own question. You just answered your own question. If you're giving to receive more, that's one thing. If you're giving and you receive more, then that's something totally different. In other words, don't try to feed, going back to what we said last night, don't try to feed yourself by giving. Know that you're going to be fed and relax and allow yourself to receive.
Okay. Well, but for some people, or at least for myself at some point, I was not aware of this fact, that by giving, you're receiving more. But now I've experienced that by giving, I receive more, so automatically it becomes like a tempting thing. Okay, I give more, but that intention part becomes very...
You're a very blessed man because you were giving before you knew. Before you knew this, you were giving. And then you experienced it, and then you understood that by giving I received more. So what motivated you to give was not the desire for yourself. What motivated you to give was to give. Then you discover the law of the universe, so to speak. So you continue to give. And I suspect that you don't continue to give just because you're receiving more. You understand that you've completed a circuit. You're an engineer. You completed a circuit, right? Yeah. I know you're not an electrical engineer, but you're a civil engineer, but you completed a circuit. And so you discovered a law of the universe, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, in terms of intention, that
your intention is to be to serve.
Knowledge kind of destroys the intention, or kind of pollutes them.
Yeah, it does seem that way, doesn't it? You're absolutely right. It does seem that way, but that's still the struggle with the nafs. It's still the struggle with the nafs, and that's a blessing. It's a real blessing. It really doesn't pollute it. It makes you aware. It makes you aware of the choice. It makes you aware that the motivation is not just to receive. The motivation is to give, and we say. There's a saying, as I said the other, put your effort, let things happen,
Well, in the same way, when people talk, ud'uni astajib lakum, ask and I will respond.
Right.
The response is promised. What that response will be is not promised.
That's right.
Nor when. So when you say, I will get more by giving, you seem to have an idea that somehow you assume what you're going to get is going to be liked. And you want it. You may not. There's a caveat in there. It's not all fun and games.
I think
You may get what you're not expecting.
But I think you still receive, but you may not be aware of it.
You may receive it, you may not be aware of it. You may receive in a way that you never thought you would receive. You may receive something that's a greater challenge than you expected. You may receive, Allah says, you come walking toward me, I come running toward you. Okay, well, boom, you might crash right into Allah. It's exactly like Sidi Abdul Hadi is saying, and that's really the very crux of the issue. That be careful what you ask for because you might get it. So
Like the man that wanted to be like Shaykh Rashid.
yeah, he got it, and he was lifted to that state. Well, there was no more purpose in his life, you see, and he wasn't even his murid. He did an act of service to him. And so, if you start thinking, well, if I help the sheikh and I send him food, and then he asks me what I want, and I tell him that I want to be like him, and I'm like him, and that's the end of my journey, I might die. I'm not going to give him any food. Because I don't want to die. Isn't it wonderful we don't have the capacity to really think that way with such strength and such conviction that we're kept in enough ignorance that we can still do good active service? But you're absolutely right. You can sense that it pollutes it, but it really, the yogis have a name for that, by the way. In the terms of service, karma yoga. They call it kriyamana karma, which is actions that you perform today that have an effect at a later time. And you don't know what they are. And maybe they think in a later life or something like that. But it's the same basic concept that you perform an action now, but you don't know when the response to that action is going to come or how it's going to come, like Sidi said. You just don't know. So you have to be committing that act of service fi sabilillah, or for the sake of that service in and of itself, and receive what comes to you with gratitude. Somebody else?
You said that the need determines the work, and so I'm trying to make sense of this last comment that you made, and the need determining the work. So what is it that you ask for? Do you ask that Allah just places you where Allah wants you, or do you formulate a strategy based on needs that you see? What happens if you see multiple needs? What if you're attracted to multiple needs? How do you determine what to ask for?
We're social animals, aren't we? And this is part of Sohbet and why we call it as a cornerstone in the Naqshbandi Mujadidi line, and also it's in the Shazali line too. That is a really important question because you have to know what you can do and what you can't do also. And when you perceive a need, you may have the ability to help fulfill that need through someone else or through some other means other than yourself. So, of course, Allah places us where we are to be. But you see something that you know you don't have the time or the energy or the knowledge to do, and that's why we have the technology also. That's the good side of the technology. Send an email and say, yeah, Shaykh Rashid, here's something that maybe Legacy could do, or talk to your brother here, or talk to this gentleman you met today, or somebody else. You become now part of the network, part of the connector, part of the attractor. We're part of a greater whole. And that's how you're fulfilling the need. It doesn't have to be me or you. We may be just the eyes through which something is seen, but we may not be the hands through which it is done. And we see the model. It's like we do the Arabic language program in Morocco. Mitra, my wife, is the director of that program. Who delivers the program? Sidi Abdul Rahman Fitzgerald in Morocco. We don't deliver the program. He delivers the program. We deliver the need to him. We help train our people going over. He trains his people doing it. It's a coalition. We build a coalition. And if it's built on trust and friendship and love, and in our case also deen, then we have loyalty to one another. If you break the chain anywhere along the line, then you're being selfish. You don't break the chain. And we do that all over the world, right? So we know what we provide. I once turned to our partners at the School of Public Health at George Washington University. I said, "You're a huge university with an incredible endowment, $1 billion endowment or whatever they have. You know, I mean, what do you need us for?" And Blaine Parrish, Dr. Blaine Parrish, who's a brilliant guy, turns to me and says, "For exactly what you do." That was his answer. For exactly what you do. So we do what we do, and they do what they do, and we have a coalition. And that's just in day-to-day work. So it's the same thing in human relationships. That's why sohbet is so important. It's the original networking, you know.
And I think something else, just what you said, the facilitator. Very often you can put two things together and you're not in it.
Yeah.
You just direct it. That maybe is one of the, it's a very selfless way of accomplishment. And I think like.
And it's a role.
Introducing someone, a seeker to a sheikh. You may, and then you're not there anymore. Those are very, I think, those are indirect ways of helping people and connecting things, or maybe some of the most selfless ways that people can act.
There's actually even what we call the hidden oasis for that in the Abdals and the Anwars. This is happening all the time, but we just don't know it.
The Prophet ﷺ was very, very positively advised people, if you can help somebody else, arrange it, and then.
Yeah, stay back.
Yeah, stay back.
And that's and truly people understand that, really respect it. That's part of your reputation also. That's also part of what people look to you for. You know, there's a nice project going on in the mall in Washington that Hazami Marada is doing. This week, is it? Next week? October 23rd to 26th, which is the artwork of Syrian refugee children. You know, and we're assisting with that, but we're not doing much. We're just networking it, and Rahil's going to go up and maybe somebody else go up and help. But it's not our project, but of course it is, you know. I mean, certainly you could spend your life doing that and not being able to put food on your table, but there seems to be balance in it all. It balances out. That's why I like to say, let the work speak for itself. You let the people speak for themselves. And this is it's a wonderful characteristic, human capability to do that. We can't solve every problem ourselves. But if you expand the definition of yourself, then you are. I have no problem saying that the testing of 15,000 people in Morocco for diabetes is a legacy project, even though not one legacy person from here is working in it. We have one of our fellows who considers himself a legacy person. He's doing it. It's his project. It's under his name. He's the director of he's the medical director for the Touradon province, and he's doing it. But he does it, and he says, "I'm doing this as in cooperation with Legacy International." What's the cooperation? Cooperation is our support, our love, whatever it is. You see? So Allah takes care of it all. Anyone else?
What are the dimensions of that, and if one feels called to try and qualify to see if one is qualified to serve the Sheikh by helping him carry his responsibilities? I'm not quite sure how to frame the question. I think about the responsibilities that the Sheikh carries, both known and unknown to me, and what it means to try and serve in that way, and what are the dimensions of that service? How does one qualify?
It's actually one aspect of the whole subject that I've avoided talking about this weekend, because it's a subject I like to talk about among just the students, because it can easily be misunderstood and misguided, and be seeming self-referencing, self-aggrandizing. But it's a very, very important subject. The power of loyalty and obedience and trust is very hard, and you don't trust until something comes along and then it sows a seed of distrust in you. We are all human beings. We're all fallible human beings. It's what's the real intent of the spiritual journey? What's the real intent of the Shaykh? You remember the story of the Shaykh who was walking with the Marids, and they come to a river in Spate. Remember that story? And there's no way to cross the river. Night is coming, and there are dacoits, there are bandits behind them. And he has to get the people across the river to safety. And they don't know how to get across the river. And he writes the name of Allah and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a piece of paper or something he has, and he writes it on this, and he hands it to them, and he says, "Here, hold this in your hand and walk across the river." And they take it, and they hold their hands to each other, and they walk across the river, and they get to the other side, and they wave the Shaykh to come on, the dacoits are coming. And he says, no, he won't. And so one of them holds that paper in the hand, walks back on the top of the river, comes back and says to the Shaykh, "Please, why are you not coming?" He said, "I have to tell you, I'm not really a good Shaykh. I've been pretending to be a Shaykh. I'm not really a Shaykh. This is what all these years you've given us all this good advice, and we trust you, and look what you just did. Here, take my hand and walk across the river." And he takes his hand and they walk across the river. You see? Very powerful story. Because his intention was good. He was brought to that. And his own Marids uplifted him. You see? So, you know, you got to be very, very careful, because I didn't make me who I am. My Shaykh gave me the ijazah. And his Shaykh Muhammad Said Khan Rahmatullah gave him ijazah. And his Shaykh Hamid Hassan al-Alawi Rahmatullah gave him ijazah. And his Shaykh Abdul Bari Shah Rahmatullah gave him ijazah. And his Shaykh gave it. We can say authoritatively we are of the Ahl Bayt. Because Salman Farsi was so told, you are of the family of the Prophet. And he wasn't of the bloodline of the Prophet. Right? Uwais Qarni was considered as the family of the Prophet. He was not of the Prophet. It's by ijazat, by lineage. And so that's an awesome responsibility. And who is to stand up and say, him okay, but not him. Him not okay, not him. And if you don't think that that's a humbling state to be in, if you don't think that that's a heavy burden to carry, I invite you, finish your practice, finish it, and you can be the first sheikh in the order. And I invite you to carry that weight, and you see what it's like. I don't say that for empathy. I didn't choose it. But be careful, because, you know, be careful who you're distrusting, and be careful who you're obeying, and be careful who you're questioning. Because eventually you've got, if you start down that line, you've got to give up Islam at some point. You've got to give up religion at some point, because you will not trust anything or anybody. It's the only way you can escape the responsibility is to deny that the foundation is real. And I don't mean giving up a religion, I mean giving up the truth. Huh? So it's very, very serious and very important. And if you don't think it's not something that I don't think about 100 times a day, believe me, I think about it 100 times a day. And I rather consider myself unworthy than worthy. And I have plenty of reasons to do that. So being in the sway of the Shaykh means being in the sway of the awliyaullah, not of me. Me. No. It's your bad luck, it's me. But it's your good luck, it's of all the people who came before me. Anything else? Safe journeys, my friends. What time are we praying? 1 o'clock? Clean up prayer.